My mother had a secret, a miraculous medicine that would make a woman's figure curvaceous, her waist slender, and her whole body emit an enchanting fragrance just by inserting a small pill into her navel. All the girls in the village were captivated by this scent, but no one knew that this intoxicating scent, beautiful at first, would eventually claim lives. Late spring, the cats in the village howled fiercely. My mother was giving birth in the east room. Her cries of pain mingled with the cats' wails, sending shivers down my spine. Finally, my mother finished giving birth. My father uttered a prayer, Amitabha Buddha, and urged me to fetch some porridge quickly. My parents adored each other, and I was afraid of being scolded by my father if I delayed even a minute. I hurriedly brought out a bowl of red sugar and egg porridge. Pushing aside the curtain of the east room, a strange scent wafted directly into my face. It turned out my mother had given birth to my younger sister, whom we called Little Sis. My mother's family possessed a secret medicinal formula. When made into a pill and inserted into the navel, it would enhance a woman's figure, make her waist slender, and her entire body emit a fragrant scent. My mother had used it for many years, so every time she gave birth to a daughter, they naturally carried that fragrance. My father was cradling and kissing Little Sis, while my mother, weak and drenched in sweat, leaned against the headboard, looking exhausted. I fed my mother the porridge, while the midwife was busy congratulating my father. My father was different from other men in the village. He loved daughters, and my mother had an easy time giving birth, bearing 4 children in a row. It was a pity that my twin elder sisters had gotten lost while helping my parents gather herbs. Otherwise, this year they would have been of marriageable age. Thinking of my sisters, I sighed from the bottom of my heart, then saw my father hand the midwife a large string of money and a strip of pork as payment. The midwife thanked him, then cast a malicious glance at me before turning to my mother. I see Willow becoming more beautiful every day. I suppose your family will be making the navel fragrance again this year. If you do, please save some for me. My mother looked at me in a panic, suddenly choking on her porridge and coughing violently. My father's face darkened with displeasure as he told her, "If we make it, of course, we'll save some for you. Willow, help your father see the guest out." The midwife forced a smile, picked up the pork, and headed for the door. At the threshold, she asked me, "How old are you?" I replied, 14. She clicked her tongue, shook her head with regret. "Your mother is about to make the medicine, a fresh bloom like you. What a pity." Not understanding her meaning, I stared at her blankly. She pursed her lips, leaned close to my neck, inhaled deeply, and exclaimed, "Fragrant." Then she scrutinized me from head to toe. "If I could cultivate a figure like yours, any price would be worth it." I recoiled. My family had moved to this village 2 years ago. My parents had been making the pills for 2 years. The vivid red pills emitted a peculiar fragrance, and only 49 portions were made each year. Initially, they intended to sell it to the villagers for 10,000 coins, but no one believed them. After much deliberation, my mother only managed to sell 1 portion. With no other choice, my mother sold it to a shop in the city for 50,000 a portion, suddenly becoming incredibly wealthy. Who would have thought that this year, the villagers would flock to my mother, scrambling to buy it? It's true what they say, the harder something is to obtain, the more people desire it. The courtyard was soaked, covered in bloody water that the midwife had been repeatedly emptying from various basins. The water, a vivid crimson, streamed to the flower bed by the fence, dazzling even more brightly under the clear moonlight. I entered the house. My father was helping my mother clean herself. My mother used the medicine internally, and despite having just given birth, her figure remained trim, so my father constantly looked at her with affectionate eyes. Seeing me, mother's face flushed, and she pushed father away, her eyes brimming with tears. She pulled one side of the blanket around her, concealing her snow-white skin. I lowered my head, pretending not to notice, and asked my mother, "Mother, since you're making the navel fragrance, can we give a portion to Liz? Liz is my closest friend, a year older than me, small and covered in scabies. Her father always calls her ugly and plans to marry her off to the village idiot." I secretly thought, if she used the navel fragrance and became beautiful, she would surely marry better. But her family had no money, so I could only shamelessly beg my mother to give her a free portion. My mother shook her head. "No, our family has money, our clothes and belongings are the best in the village. Even our tea is made only from young buds. Whatever I ask for, my parents always indulge me, but today my mother refused." My mother held my hand, coaxing me. "Willow, listen to me. That medicine cannot be used carelessly. If not used properly, it will cost you your life. Who would believe that? It's just a money trap. What do you mean? Improper use will cost your life? Hasn't my mother used it her whole life? Over the past 2 years, nearly 100 portions have been bought at the Spring Welcome Inn, and I haven't heard of anyone dying from it. I was fuming internally. Suddenly, gongs echoed loudly from outside the village. Someone outside called for my mother. "Mother Willow, they're kite-flying someone. Hurry, come see the kite flying." My mother had just given birth, so of course, she couldn't go to see any commotion. My father moved quickly, slipping on his sandals, pushing the door open, and rushing outside. I intended to follow, but then I saw my mother suddenly tremble. She clutched little sis, her face pale. "Willow, don't go." I didn't know what kite-flying was, and I was still angry with my mother, so how could I listen? Pushing the door, I ran after my father. I followed him all the way to the end of the bluestone alley. From the top of the archway hung a woman, completely naked, her hair disheveled, her mouth stuffed with tattered roots. Below, the spectators were packed tightly. The midwife, who had delivered my younger sister, was spitting on the ground, chatting with others. "Look at her. That figure, you just know she's a loose woman, and look at that slender waist. Her husband hasn't been gone long, and she's already having an affair with her brother-in-law. How shameless." Wasn't she the only one in the village using the navel fragrance? She cultivated that smooth skin just to go and do immoral things. She deserves to be kite-flown. I wondered, they clearly despised that woman's figure, so why did they all want to buy my mother's navel fragrance to become like her? At that moment, the village elder climbed onto the platform. He used scissors to perform a cruel act beneath the woman's body. She screamed in agony, her head thrown back as far as it could go, but her mouth was stuffed with roots, preventing her from speaking. Next, the elder yanked something hard and then severed the rope suspending her. The woman plunged headfirst from the archway like a kite, a long string trailing behind her. That string, it turned out, was her intestines. Cheers erupted. The midwife and the women beside her picked up stones from the ground, cursing and throwing them. The woman's eyes were wide open, blood foaming from her mouth. I dared not look anymore, my legs like jelly. I ran straight home. When I burst into my mother's room, my father followed right behind. My mother ignored little sis, who was wailing for a feeding, and frantically asked, "Did they kite-fly someone? Who was it?" "Wang Hua's wife," my father replied casually. "Last year, when my mother made the pills, Wang Hua's wife in this village bought one." To say "bought" was misleading. In reality, my mother secretly gave it to her. Wang Hua's wife, who used to have a dark complexion, a thick waist, and flat buttocks, became increasingly beautiful and alluring after using the medicine. The villagers saw her growing more captivating, which is why this year they flocked to my mother to buy her medicine. I was trembling all over with fear, embraced by my mother, but her voice couldn't hide a strange delight. She asked my father, "Was the kite flying beautiful?" My father grunted, looking at my mother with doting affection. "Beautiful." Thinking of those intestines, nausea welled up inside me. I suddenly remembered my mother's earlier words. The medicine cannot be used carelessly. If not used properly, it will cost you your life. My vision blurred in flashes, my head slumped to one side, and I fainted. In the very moment I passed out, I heard my mother ask my father, "Did you get that?" I didn't know when I returned to my room. When I woke up, it was already dawn. Sounds echoed from the courtyard. I sprang up, looked through the window, and saw my father carrying several buckets of water. He rinsed away the puddles of blood in the courtyard, then took a spade to the flower garden and buried something. Before long, guests started arriving one after another. They were all women, carrying brown sugar, glutinous rice, and eggs to help with recovery. I was afraid they would bring up last night's events. Fortunately, they hadn't said much before they were eagerly begging my mother to sell them the medicine. I awkwardly served tea and water, but they just looked at me and whispered amongst themselves. Goosebumps covered my entire body, so I went out to the courtyard and headed to Liz's house. She was chopping firewood. I offered her a pastry. She hastily stuffed her mouth, choking so hard her chest heaved and her eyes bulged. I patted her back. As soon as she caught her breath, she suddenly remembered something and lowered her voice. "Willow, your family is going to make medicine again, aren't they? Run away now. The whole village is saying that to make those pills, they have to burn your asterisk bones to ash to use as a preliminary ingredient." I gasped, "What? My parents love me so much. How could they? How could they not?" People say your two elder sisters weren't lost. Your parents killed them to make the medicine. I reeled, almost collapsing to the ground. My two elder sisters were twins, always inseparable. In our first year here, my parents took them to the mountains to gather herbs. But that evening, only my parents returned. They said my sisters had both gotten lost. The villagers searched for several days, but my mother told them to stop. She said they were probably eaten by wolves. From then on, my parents began making the navel fragrance. Before long, the first batch was ready. I swallowed hard a few times, leaving Liz behind. I rushed home. The East Room was exclusively used for making medicine, and my parents never allowed me inside. I was determined to see what the ingredients for the navel fragrance were. Opening the gate, I saw my father lounging on a rattan chair, sunbathing. In the vegetable garden, several of his village friends were tilling the soil. My father was a lazy man, diligent only when making the pills. On regular days, he'd just loiter with his friends, so lazy that he even had others clean up our vegetable garden. Those men craned their necks, peering into my mother's room. Seeing me return, they reluctantly pulled their gaze away, spat into their palms, and swung their hoes, resuming their work. With my father watching, I dared not enter the East Room, so I just made tea and offered it to him. The men glanced at me. Willow's grown taller, hasn't she? Still so fragrant, and her face is even fairer. They often said such things, but hearing it today, my legs beneath my skirt trembled uncontrollably, a fear like a chilling wind piercing to my very bones. I pressed my lips together, not answering. They thought I was shy and continued, 50,000 coins for a wife like Willow? Absolutely worth it. 50,000 isn't expensive, it's like getting a new wife. I just hope our brother here is willing to sell us the medicine. My father threw a peanut into his mouth, silently watching my mother, who was cradling little Sis and nursing her by the window. She replied, "Your father and I have discussed it. We'll sell it to you all for 20,000 each. We'll sell out this year, and after that, we won't make it anymore. After all, raising just one daughter will be enough money." The greedy men cheered joyfully at my mother, but I felt like I'd been doused with cold water. No one paid attention to my mother's words. After that, raising just one daughter will be enough money. But clearly, my mother now had two daughters. Panicked, I accidentally dropped and shattered the teapot in my hand. Little Sis cried out in fear. My mother frowned, looking at me for a long time, then cast a significant glance at my father before turning back to the bed. My father chased all the men away. I stood frozen for a moment, cleaned up the teapot shards, and then turned towards the main gate. I wanted to run away. I no longer wanted to see what was in the East Room, I only thought of making a quick escape. As I lifted one foot, there was a thud. I looked down to see a meat cleaver thrown right in front of my feet. If I had taken another step, it would certainly have landed on my instep. I screamed in fright and pulled my foot back. "Willow, where do you think you're going?" my father asked in a low voice. I clutched the hem of my skirt, trembling, and said I was going to throw away the broken teapot. My father gestured with his chin towards the chicken coop. "Just throw it in the chicken coop, and while you're at it, kill a chicken." I steeled myself, picked up the knife from the ground, and went into the chicken coop to catch a chicken. My mind was preoccupied, and my hands shook uncontrollably. I opened the coop door but couldn't catch any chickens. Chickens scattered everywhere in the yard, and my father cursed loudly. I suppressed my panic, trying to catch them one by one. When I reached the flower bed, a large rooster was scratching at the ground. After much digging, it picked up something and shook its head vigorously. I stepped closer to look, so terrified that I stumbled back several steps and completely collapsed onto the ground. The thing in the rooster's mouth was a piece of intestine. The scene of Wang Hua's wife being kite-flown flashed in my mind, replaying over and over. Then I remembered my mother asking my father last night if he had got an asterisk that. I lay sprawled on the ground, dry heaving. My father walked over, snatched the intestine, buried it, then grabbed the rooster and swung the knife down. Its neck was severed instantly. Chicken blood splattered all over the ground. I remembered those perfectly round navel fragrance pills, also a vivid blood red color. My father glanced at me. "What are you scared of? It's just a piece of sheep's intestine." He then lifted me from the ground and told me to go boil water for chicken stew. I turned back to look at the flower bed twice. 2 years ago, when we first arrived in this village, my mother had told my father to build a flower bed for planting flowers. In summer, my parents would often sit there admiring the flowers, and in winter, they would look at the empty bed and talk to themselves. Suddenly, I thought, something seemed to be buried at the bottom of the flower bed. Could it be my sisters? Terrified, I tried to suppress my fear, trembling as I stepped into the kitchen. An hour later, the chicken soup was ready. I brought a bowl to my mother. My mother sipped slowly, glancing at me several times. "Willow, is something bothering you? Why do you look so pale? Did you play with Liz today? What did Liz say?" my mother asked incessantly. Each question made me tremble with fear. I didn't know how to answer when little sis started crying. My mother told me to change little sis's diaper. When I finished, my mother handed me her bowl of chicken soup. "Mother doesn't want to eat, you have it." I secretly decided that tonight I would run away. Thinking of having to leave my mother, my heart ached with bitterness. As I drank the chicken soup, sip by sip, I wondered if I should take Liz with me when I left. Suddenly, my mother's face seemed to waver before my eyes. I reached out to my mother. "Mother!" Before I could finish, I collapsed. My mother had put medicine in the chicken soup while I was changing little sis's diaper. When I woke up, it was dark. I was bound in the east room, the medicine room. My mother stripped off all my clothes, humming softly as she applied fragrant medicine all over my body. My mother always told outsiders that her 4 daughters had been fragrant since birth, but I knew that we didn't insert pills into our navels. The reason we continuously smelled fragrant was because my mother applied fragrant medicine to us every day. I called out, "Mother." My mother turned up the wick of the oil lamp a little brighter. "Willow, you know what's happening, don't you?" Tears streamed down my face. "Mother, are you really going to turn me into a pill to sell?" My mother took out a handkerchief and carefully wiped her hands from palm to fingertips, then patted little sis, who was lying in her lap. "Daughters are worthless. Your father and I have indulged you for so many years. Exchanging you for a little money, why should you resent us?" My mother was right. Girls in this village were worth nothing. Like Liz, who slept in a pigsty just not starving to death, was already good fortune. My enjoying such blessings was truly unique. My mother gave me a sip of honey water. Suddenly, I heard the villagers' calls echoing from outside. High and low voices, all calling my name. I glared at my mother, furious. "Are you telling them I'm lost too? The villagers already know you kill your daughters for medicine. Who are you putting on this act for now?" My mother curved her pinky finger to wipe my mouth. "It's an act for the whole village. Everyone knows what ingredients are used to make those pills. They need to believe you're dead to truly trust this navel fragrance. Isn't that interesting?" My parents pretended I was lost. They also pretended to search. In reality, they all knew I was already dead. The calls lasted for a while, then died down completely. My mother brushed dust from her clothes. "Willow, Mother doesn't want to, but I still have to send you on your way." She covered my mouth, hung me from the ceiling beam, and held scissors pointed at me. I remembered Wang Hua's wife being kite-flown. I remembered the intestines in the flower bed. The cold gleam of the scissor blades flashed. I squeezed my eyes shut. Snip! My body didn't hurt. The room was strangely silent, only the creaking sound of the rope on the ceiling beam remained. I slowly opened my eyes, only to see my mother holding a lock of my hair that she had cut. I wanted to call my mother, but my mouth was still gagged. Just then, the courtyard gate creaked open, and my father returned. My mother let me down, untied me, and put my clothes back on. My mother raised her hand to pat my head. I shrank back in fear, pressing against the corner of the wall, unable to stand steady. I was limp, unable to speak, not knowing what she was truly planning. My father walked in, saw the lock of hair in my mother's hand, then looked at my distraught appearance. He softly asked, "Did Mother scare you?" Even though I knew my parents were heartless, my father's voice still made me resentfully nod. Little sis was sleeping soundly, yet my mother suddenly burst into tears. She tied my lock of hair with a red string and waved, "Willow, don't be scared. How could your parents kill you? Mother was just frightening you." After speaking, my mother cautiously looked outside. My father patted my mother's hand. "Don't worry. Everyone in this village knows we're just pretending to look for Willow. They've all gone home." I pulled the cloth out of my mouth myself, fearing they would carve me up, and sobbed in silent horror. "Parents, if you want to kill me, just do it quickly. One cut to the neck, just don't let me suffer." I wiped my tears. "Death is good. I can reunite with my sisters below. I just hope you spare little sis. We have enough money now, don't kill little sis too." It was hard to get a chance to speak, so I had to plead for everything. "Mother, only Liz is close to me in this village. When I'm gone, please give her a little extra food, okay?" My mother burst out laughing, weeping and laughing at the same time. "Willow, you still don't trust Mother? You kill daughters like crushing ants. How can I dare to trust you?" I pleaded. "Mother, I'm about to die. Don't lie to me anymore. I know my eldest and second sisters were both killed by you and Father, buried under our flower bed, right?" I looked at her like a tabby cat toying with a mouse. I didn't know if it was guilt, but my mother suddenly choked on her words. Her tears fell faster, and my father sighed. He walked over to the small stone mortar. After my two sisters went missing, my father cleaned up the east room. Though lazy, he personally renovated this room, not asking anyone for help. The floor was entirely paved with good wooden planks. My father bent down, straining, and lifted the plank next to the stone mortar. He waved me over. "Willow, come here and see this." I, limp and weak, crawled over. Beneath the plank was a dark, pitch-black cellar. Just then, a flickering oil lamp suddenly appeared from below. Rustling footsteps echoed. The flickering light advanced, illuminating the mottled earthen wall, making it look like a ghost. I recoiled in fear, my heart pounding in my throat. Suddenly, the light went out and a head unexpectedly emerged from the cellar. It was a girl with a pale face. I almost screamed. My mother clamped her hand over my mouth and whispered in my ear, "Willow, don't be scared. Look closely, that's your eldest sister, Lily." Before I could get a good look at Lily, another identical face appeared from behind. Lily pointed her slender finger at me. "Willow, I'm your second sister, Daisy." I stood rooted to the spot. Since my two sisters went missing, my mother had always said they were carried off by wolves. Before Liz told me my sisters were made into pills by my mother, I often saw my mother cry and thought my sisters had truly ended up in a wolf's belly. But if my sisters were all alive, why did my mother cry? If they were alive, why did they have to live in this cellar? Why didn't my mother let them come home? Why did my parents have to deceive the villagers? Questions swirled in my head. I stood there bewildered, forgetting to react even when my sisters embraced me. Only when Lily squeezed my cheek hard did I snap out of it. My sisters' appearances hadn't changed much, only their skin was a bit pale from not seeing sunlight for a long time. I was about to open my mouth to ask, when suddenly, horrifying cat wails echoed from outside. My mother quickly told my two sisters to take me down to the cellar. My father replaced the plank, stepped on it a few times to secure it, then with my mother cleaned up and took little sis back to the room. The cellar was very spacious. My father had even dug a passage to the adjacent wood storage room, so it wasn't stuffy at all. Inside the cellar, there was a large bed where my three sisters and I could sleep comfortably, a dining table laden with food and drinks, an oil lamp, a mirror, and even cosmetics. Truly small but mighty. My two sisters were taller than before, a little plump, dressed in clean clothes, their hair neatly tied up. They looked like they were living quite well. The three of us hugged and cried for a while. When I calmed down, I asked Lily why they lived here. Lily recounted that 2 years ago, she and Daisy helped my parents gather herbs. Since they were new to the village and unfamiliar with the mountain paths, they lost my parents at a fork in the road. Not only did they get lost, but they also fell into a mountain gorge. The gorge was barren and steep, impossible to climb out of, so they huddled down there. Luckily, there was a wild pear tree nearby, so my sisters didn't starve. They stayed down there for 7 or 8 days. Fortunately, my parents found them afterward. Initially, my mother was overjoyed. Seeing that my sisters weren't seriously injured, she intended to bring them home, but my father stopped her. My father said, "They've been outside for 7 or 8 days. If we bring them back now, aren't you afraid they'll kite-fly them?" After that, my father dug a cellar beneath the east room and, under the cover of night, brought my sisters back to imprison them in the cellar. They were kept locked up for 2 years. Mother strictly warned them never to let anyone discover them, or it would cost them their lives. Lily finished her story and asked me, "Willow, do you know what kite-flying is?" How could I not know? Not only do I know, but I've also seen it with my own eyes. Suppressing my nausea, I recounted. Wang Hua's wife in the village used mother's navel fragrance to become beautiful, secretly went into her brother-in-law's room, was discovered, and was just kite-flown. My two sisters were so scared they started crying. I pondered for a moment. Since we moved to this village, that was the first time someone was kite-flown. Because when father came back, mother even asked him if the kite flying was beautiful, so I thought father hadn't seen it before then. So why, when he found you two, was father afraid people would kite-fly you? Moreover, you two didn't have affairs with men, so why would you be kite-flown? My sisters didn't understand either. We worried for a while, then simply blew out the lamp and went to sleep. The next morning, my mother came down to the cellar to get the chamber pot. It was then that I suddenly remembered how much urine my parents always emptied from the chamber pot. I had always found it strange, but now I finally understood. It also contained my two sisters' urine. Now that the weather was warmer during the day, my three sisters and I, bored in the cellar, would go to the ventilation hole near the storage room. When no one was around, we could secretly peek our heads out and look around. My mother had hung my lock of hair on the wall of the east room, in a row with 2 other locks. The aunts and sisters who came to visit saw it and nodded in silent understanding. This was the signal to begin making the navel fragrance. Ever since I went missing, more and more people came to our house asking for the medicine. My parents carefully considered and finally selected 49 people. They collected money up front, as my mother had promised, 2 taels of silver for each portion. After collecting the money, those who couldn't buy it stopped coming to the house. Those who did buy it were busy tending to rice seedlings in the fields to make up for the 2 taels of silver. Our house suddenly became deserted. My father also became busier. During the day, he went to the mountains to gather herbs. At night, he went to the east room to grind medicine. My mother carried little sis with her, occasionally letting us out to get some fresh air. My 2 sisters were timid and still didn't understand why. If the villagers saw them, they would be kite-flown. I couldn't help but ask my mother. My mother pondered for a long time. "Willow, do you know why Wang Hua's wife died? Because she went into her brother-in-law's room." My mother nodded. "This archway in the village is a symbol of chastity. The villagers value a daughter's virtue above all else. Your 2 sisters were outside for 7 or 8 days. If they returned to the village now, it would be hard to avoid people saying they had been shamed outside. At that point, even with 1,000 mouths, they couldn't clear their names. The only option would be to wait to be kite-flown. My sisters and I finally understood then. No wonder my mother made them hide in this cellar, hiding for 2 whole years. Originally, my mother only wanted to save her daughters' lives. Later, she discovered that these villagers treated human lives like dirt. Killing or eating them was nothing, and they were very superstitious about using living people for medicine. So, my mother adapted, making them believe that my 2 sisters had been killed by their own parents to make medicine. Thinking of this, I grew anxious again. "Mother, how many more years do we have to hide like this?" My mother sighed, looking out at the flower bed in the courtyard, her eyes red-rimmed. "Soon, less than a year." For a year, I ran around the village all day. I couldn't even stand being confined for a few days. A whole year, I'd surely go mad. I immediately whined to my mother. Mother, let's move somewhere else. We're not originally from this place." Who knows why my parents suddenly moved to this village? We were originally from an outer district, several mountains away from this village. My maternal grandfather's family ran a prosperous pharmacy. One year, my mother's family suddenly sent someone. My mother went to meet them once, and when she returned, she fell severely ill, crying so much that her eyes were almost completely blind. My mother then cried for 3 whole months. One early morning, my parents suddenly told us we had to move somewhere else. From then on, my mother applied fragrant medicine to the 3 of us sisters every day. When our bodies were almost saturated with the scent of the medicine, my father said we could depart. We hired a cart and transported our luggage to this village at the foot of the mountain. Upon arrival, my mother told the villagers that she knew how to create the navel fragrance, which would permeate the entire body. Regarding the curvaceous figure, slender waist, and fragrant body, the villagers immediately believed it just by looking at my mother and us. The only thing was that simply inserting a pill into the navel would do the trick. No one believed that, for the time being. At that time, I also thought my mother was lying because I had never heard her say she knew how to make such a thing before. She never even stepped into her grandfather's pharmacy, and at home, she only sewed shoe soles, not even particularly skillfully, her 10 fingertips covered in needle pricks like a sieve. It wasn't until my mother actually made those vivid red pills and sold each portion to the spring Welcome Inn for 50,000 that I truly believed my mother possessed this ability. But with such a skill, couldn't she earn money anywhere? Why did she insist on making us 3 sisters live this miserable life? Pretending to be dead, hidden in a dark cellar, living a dark existence at the foot of this mountain. My mother heard me demand to move. She shook her head. "Willow, listen. Your parents' business isn't finished yet. We can't leave. Once it's done, we'll leave immediately." I glanced at my father. He was throwing several venomous scorpions into the stone mortar. The mortar wheel ground with a thudding sound, quickly turning the scorpions into a muddy paste that flowed down the wheel into a large barrel below. My father saw me looking, bent down to scrape the mud from the mortar, and grumbled, "Listen to your mother." I gave up. Then I saw my father pull out an earthen pot, untie the blue floral cloth covering its mouth, and a snake lunged out from inside. Its fangs had been removed, but it still sprang up high. I recoiled in fear, only to see my father grab the snake and throw it into the stone mortar. Next came a centipede, a toad, and a lizard. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Parents, are you using all these poisonous things to make medicine? Isn't it dangerous to put this into the navel? My mother laughed. Before, when we sold it, we used flower oil mixed with white aconite, coral, and pearls. Now that we're selling the navel fragrance to the villagers, of course, your parents have to add a little spice. Why? My mother didn't say what she wanted to avenge, but I saw her clench her teeth in bitter hatred, knowing immediately that this grudge was not small. My mother cried again, looking out at the flower bed. My sisters and I dared not speak anymore, quietly descending into the cellar. The next day, my father's friends came again. They claimed to be there to chat with him, but in reality, they were trying to find out when the navel fragrance would be ready. My father leisurely sipped his wine, in no hurry. The men scratched their heads impatiently. Look, besides your wife, there are no other beautiful women or girls left in the village now. Before, Wang Hua's wife also became much prettier after using the navel fragrance, but she was kite-flown before we even had a chance to admire her. You and your wife hurry and make the pills. Don't get caught up in personal matters. You need to focus on the main business. Once my wife uses your medicine and becomes beautiful, I'll buy it every year so she can give birth to several daughters with natural fragrances like your 4 Willow sisters. Even if they're married off as secondary wives, the money spent on the navel fragrance will be recouped. That's right, I see it now. With the navel fragrance, all the girls in our village will become precious later on. They explained it meticulously to my father. My father remained unmoved. He seemed to truly understand that begging was not a business transaction. The men, disheartened, craned their necks to look at the window towards my mother's room. But my mother had drawn the curtains a long time ago, so they saw nothing. Finally, someone blurted out, before Wang Hua's wife was kite-flown, didn't anyone taste asterisk her? Her brother-in-law probably did, and besides him, only the village elder. Aren't you going to ask the elder what it was like? See if it was as wonderful as the twins from back then? As he spoke, my father immediately threw a wine bottle at him. Get out. The man who spoke was hit squarely on the head, blood seeping from his temple. He clutched his head, glaring resentfully at my father. The person next to him pulled him back. What nonsense are you talking about? Have you forgotten that his family also had a pair of missing twins? Why are you bringing up twins here? You're just stirring up sadness. Weren't his twins made into pills anyway? What else does he have to regret now? He said, walking away. My father stood stunned for a moment, then went into the house, grabbed a bucket of water and went to the fence to water the flowers. My 2 sisters and I gaped. My father was originally a carefree and lazy man. But since coming to this village, although his speech could sometimes be harsh, he had never argued like this. Why was he so strange today? My 2 sisters were still alive and well. Why did he go berserk when twins were mentioned? I carefully thought about what that man had said. My eyes glazed over as I looked at my sisters. Sisters, who exactly are the delicious twins they were talking about? My sisters' faces were blank. They had better temperaments than I did and didn't like to go out much, so all the village gossip they heard was from my mouth. Asking them was pointless. I frowned. Then there's only one thing to do. Wait, I'll ask again later. For some reason, I always felt that these twin girls were somehow connected to my parents, to that flower bed, and to the revenge my mother spoke of. I waited for my parents to release us, but they suddenly became very busy. My father brought home sack after sack of medicinal herbs. My mother was busy washing, cooking, and taking care of little sis. Occasionally, they let us out to play, but whenever I mentioned the twin girls, my mother would immediately lock me back in the cellar. Before long, my mother's postpartum confinement ended. On the evening her confinement ended, my parents went to the east room. My father took the previously mashed poisonous animal meats, dried them, added various herbal powders, musk, and a large basin of cinnabar. He mixed it evenly with honey and began rolling it into pills. Immediately, the entire room was filled with a fragrant scent. My father personally rolled the pills, and because they contained musk, he didn't let us touch them. My mother, my sisters, and I sat by, watching. A strange smile appeared on my mother's face. I touched my mother's finger, then gestured with my chin towards the rolled pills. Mother, do all these people deserve to die? My mother nodded. I hugged my mother's arm. Even if you weren't seeking revenge, I'd still think they deserve to die. In their minds, they implicitly understood that these pills were made from the flesh and blood of my sisters and me. Before, they thought it was just ordinary herbal medicine, so they didn't bother to buy it. Later, when Lily and Daisy went missing, my parents deliberately hinted that the pills were made from a daughter's life. They then rushed to compete to buy it. In their eyes, daughters were worthless, but something authentically made from a daughter's life was extremely valuable. That night, my father finished rolling the pills around midnight. The next day, my father called those who had paid to come and collect their medicine. Almost the entire village gathered to watch the commotion. My father distributed the medicine, and my mother stood beside him, giving instructions. Each portion contains 12 pills. Change 1 pill each month. Remove it when bathing, then reinsert it immediately. After a whole morning of instructions, all the medicine was finally distributed. In the afternoon, the courtyard was deserted. My 2 sisters and I peeked our heads out from the storage room. My mother pulled a chair close, sewing a shirt for little sis while whispering to us. I asked my mother, "All the medicine has been taken. No one will come to our house anymore, right? Mother, let us go back to our room." "Mother," I disagreed. "Just wait and see, there will be no shortage of people coming to our house." Sure enough, the next day, people came. Several men gathered with my father, saying that as soon as they inserted the pills, their wives became passionate. They even said that although their wives hadn't immediately become beautiful, just smelling the fragrance made them feel like they had a new wife. They spoke, holding their waists, complaining that they had exerted themselves too much last night. In my mother's room, several wives also slipped in. Hearing their laughter rise and fall, I knew immediately they were discussing private matters. And so, our courtyard had visitors every day. Later, the wives emerging from my mother's room began casting flirtatious glances at the men in the courtyard. I suddenly realized that the navel fragrance my mother sold them probably wasn't just for poisoning. Indeed, less than half a year later, in early winter during the farming off-season, the village elder caught 3 pairs of men and women in adultery. This village had an unwritten law. When such a thing happened, the women would be kite-flown, and the men would have their offending parts cut off. Last spring, Wang Hua's wife was kite-flown, and her brother-in-law had his genitals cut off. Afterward, the entire village cursed him as useless, and as autumn arrived, he drowned himself in the river. The chastity archway of Kao Sun village had stood for 100 years, and the village elders' punishments were the strictest. No one could escape them. So, when the first snow fell, the village elder used the bodies of 3 women without intestines and the genitals of 3 men to offer sacrifices to the heavens. That night, I again saw my father digging up the flower bed and throwing something down. If I wasn't mistaken, it was intestines and genitals. After this incident, my mother began packing. She tightly wrapped valuables and hid them in the cellar. I guessed we were probably about to leave this place. Suddenly, it was almost Lunar New Year. After the 3 women were kite-flown, the villagers became much quieter. Coupled with several heavy snowfalls, houses were closed, and men and women in the village had fewer opportunities to gather. The village seemed more peaceful. On New Year's Eve, my parents secretly let us 3 sisters out to eat dinner. At the year-end feast amidst the joyful sound of firecrackers, I asked my mother, "It's been a long time since we've seen anyone kite-flown. When are we moving?" My mother fed little sis a few pieces of egg yolk, her face lit up by the red lantern light. "What's the hurry? Wait until spring, when the cats start wailing, then we'll leave." Again, it was late spring. The women in the village all changed into lighter clothes, and the entire village was permeated with an undeniable fragrance. The cats wailed more than usual this year. Laughing as they shed their padded clothes, the women who used the medicine had fuller figures, and their waists became noticeably slender. Even the midwife, nearly 40 years old, had a fuller figure. In the end, they became exactly like Wang Hua's wife, whom they had once despised bitterly. Thus, the same fate as Wang Hua's wife befell them. On the day little sis learned to walk, the village elder, kite-flown, ate more people amidst the wailing of cats. The villagers seemed to have become desensitized to this matter, merely thinking that wives died, and husbands married other wives. Nothing major. The women grew increasingly beautiful and vibrant, but their husbands became more and more listless. No man could endure the constant intimacy every night. As if overnight, all the men whose wives used the navel fragrance became bedridden. The village elder called the traditional healer, who diagnosed them all with the same condition: excessive conjugal activity. The healer prescribed medicine and advised abstinence to regain strength. But in less than a few days, 2 men in the village died. Both men were my father's friends. When they died, their faces were yellow like turmeric and their mouths agape. One of them still had a scar on his forehead. He was the one who had spoken of the delicious twin girls. My father went to visit them, then came home, grabbed a hoe, and dug up the entire flower bed. My father took out 2 jars and, under the cover of night, led my mother, my sisters, and me into the mountains. More than a dozen people were waiting in the mountains. I recognized them all as long-time workers from my paternal grandfather's pharmacy. I thought we would go home immediately, but my parents were in no hurry. Before long, 2 more people came along the mountain path, pushing a man towards us. As they approached, I clearly saw that it was the village elder. The village elder reeked of urine. It turned out he had been so scared he wet himself. Seeing my 3 sisters and me standing firmly beside my parents, he first screamed in terror, then, with a panicked expression, asked my father, "Willow's father, are your daughters still alive? Is there some misunderstanding between us?" My father kicked him, and he prostrated himself before the 2 jars. "There's no misunderstanding between you and me, but there's a slight misunderstanding with my aunts." My maternal family lived deep in the mountains. Though poor, everyone there possessed exquisite beauty. My mother was the eldest in the family. Below her were 1 younger brother and 2 younger sisters. My 2 aunts, Lily and Daisy, were twins, more than 10 years younger than my mother. My mother cherished them like precious jewels, but who would have thought that after my 2 aunts got married, it would be a separation between life and death? That year, the 2 aunts, introduced by a matchmaker, both married into Sun village. Their husbands were none other than Wang Hua's future husband and her brother-in-law. However, on the way back to the village, the bridal procession encountered robbers. The cowardly men, fearing death, abandoned the palanquin and fled. The robbers took my 2 aunts up the mountain. My 2 aunts pleaded earnestly, and perhaps the robbers didn't want any more trouble, so they released them. My 2 aunts found their way back to Sun village, but to their dismay, the villagers adamantly claimed they had been raped by the robbers. They could have invited someone to verify their virginity, but they didn't. The men, who had never seen twins, were greedy for their beauty and deliberated for a long time with my 2 aunts' husbands and the village elder. Finally, those beasts each paid a few dozen coins to compensate my 2 aunts' husbands for the wedding gifts. Then, right in the ancestral hall, they sequentially humiliated my 2 aunts. After that, the village elder himself, kite-flown my 2 aunts. The women in the village envied my 2 aunts' beauty. At that time, Wang Hua's wife, then an unmarried girl secretly in love with the man my aunt was supposed to marry, led the villagers in throwing stones, shattering my 2 aunts' bodies. 3 days later, my 2 aunts did not return to their birth home. My maternal grandfather and uncle worriedly searched for them, only to discover that my 2 aunts had been so utterly destroyed there was nothing left of their bodies. My 2 aunts' remains were discarded beneath the chastity archway, but the criminal sins still ran wild among the people. The villagers adamantly insisted that since my 2 aunts had married into the village, they were considered villagers, and those who lost their chastity in the village had to die in that manner. My maternal grandfather suppressed his grief and brought the shattered remains back, still forced to pay the village elder a sum of money before he was allowed to take the bodies. Back home, my maternal grandparents fell ill and were bedridden, passing away not long after. That year, I was only 11 years old. Even though they had given birth to 3 daughters, my parents were still harmonious. My mother was also very filial to my paternal grandparents, so my paternal family didn't blame my mother for anything. While my mother was planning to have another child, my uncle came with the news that both aunts and my maternal grandparents had passed away. My mother was so heartbroken that she fell into a prolonged illness. My entire paternal family saw this and felt sorrow. Afterward, my paternal grandfather met with my parents and gave them 2 medicinal formulas. One formula was the true navel fragrance substance for courtesans, containing musk, which would keep one's figure slender and prevent pregnancy. The other formula had an identical fragrance, but would cause depraved evil to seep into one's bones and marrow. Women who used this fragrance and engaged in intimacy with men would all die within a year. After bidding farewell to my paternal grandfather, my mother sent my uncle to stay with my paternal family and brought my 3 sisters and me, along with the remains of my 2 aunts, back to this village. They buried my 2 aunts' remains under the flower bed. That flower bed was right in front of the chastity archway. My parents wanted my 2 aunts to witness firsthand how those beasts died. Upon arriving here, my mother didn't know who exactly had harmed my two aunts. So my father began making friends, drinking wine, eating meat, and boasting every day. After 3 weeks of drinking, those men couldn't hold their tongues anymore. Before long, my father knew exactly who had tormented my two aunts. The village elder finally understood that my family had come here to exact revenge. He bowed repeatedly like pounding garlic, saying that he had absolutely not humiliated my two aunts years ago. My mother rushed forward and slapped him twice. You are the village elder. You could clearly have found a midwife to check my two sisters' virginity, yet you refused to do so. You are nothing but a greedy wretch who values women's lives as nothing. If you hadn't aided those evil people, who would have dared to bully my two sisters? This village is called Kao-san, but in the end, who does it truly protect? You wear your formal attire, but just like that chastity archway, every detail is filled with absurdity. No one bothered to listen to the village elder's excuses anymore. Those men stripped the village elder naked, first cutting off his genitals, then using scissors to pull out his intestines. After that, they hung his intestines on a tree branch and pushed the elder into the abyss. He had kite-flown countless people. This time, he finally became a kite himself. The pungent smell of blood spread, mingling with waves of putrid stench. Wild dogs and wolves on the mountain smelled it, their growls gradually drawing closer. My father and his brothers protected us as we descended the mountain by another path. We got into the cart. I gradually moved away from the village's chastity archway. When I could no longer see it, I asked my mother, "Mother, there are still many people alive. Haven't we finished our revenge?" My mother hugged me. "The old village elder is dead. A new one will naturally be appointed. Those who use the medicine have depravity seeped into their bones. They can't escape the fate of being kite-flown. Moreover, even if they could endure, the medicine's effects are almost a year old. No one can survive using it for a whole year." My mother used to be a gentle woman. She was a devoted wife, raised her children well, and honored her in-laws. She wouldn't even dare to kill a chicken. What a pity that this world did not allow my mother to be a virtuous woman, because this world devoured people.